Welcome back to Navigate New York. I'm so excited to introduce season 5, and this season is just filled with incredible guests that I'm so grateful that I get to sit down and interview. I'm also so grateful to be sponsored this season by Amvoy Wealth. Amvoy Wealth is a cross-border financial firm who specialise in assisting Irish individuals moving to, living in, or returning from the United States. So Amvoy Wealth are uniquely positioned to help you if you have financial interests in both Ireland and the US. You can find out more at amvoywealth.com. I'll leave their link in the show notes, and I'm so delighted to be partnering with Amvoy Wealth for season 5 of Navigate New York. Welcome back to Navigate New York. I am so excited to have my lovely friend Rhiannon Gilvarry with me as my guest today. Rhiannon, welcome to Navigate New York.
Thank you so much for having me.
I feel like this episode has been a long time coming because I also feel like you've been in New York for about 5 years and you've only been here how many months?
9, I think. 8, 9? 9.
Like seriously, the impression you have already left on New York City is amazing. So to our listeners, I wanted to start by just sort of introducing this episode with Rhiannon as to why I feel like this is going to be really helpful, specifically for Irish people who are hoping to come to New York on the grad visa. Rhiannon is here at the minute on her grad visa, which is a 12-month visa that you're eligible for in the year after graduating. So I always get lots of questions about this, and Rhiannon to me is the perfect example of what can be done in that time and how beneficial it can be. So Rhiannon, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself to our listeners, where you're from in Ireland, school, university, life outside school, all that good stuff.
My name's Rhiannon. I am from Dublin, but I went to school in Dublin in Mount Sackville, but then I went to boarding school in Tipperary. So quite varied. For university, I was in UCD. I did commerce. And then for my master's, I went to Smurfit. So yeah, all Dublin based for the most part.
Yeah. And what made you want to do a master's?
Well, I just really disliked all the finance and accounting modules. Like I loved my course, but I really was there more for the fun. I definitely wasn't like in the mindset of studying for my undergrad at all. But then in final year, I kind of switched on a little bit more and decided, oh wait, maybe I actually really like marketing. And so yeah, I just decided to, there's a scholarship application. So I applied for the scholarship. When I received that, it really just cemented that's really what I wanted to do. And when I was there, it was just like, I loved digital marketing. It's just, it doesn't feel like a job to me. So yeah, it's quite different from the accounting and finance side. So I really, really didn't excel or enjoy that.
Oh, well, it's good that you figured that out. You know, I actually always regret not doing a master's. I came on the grad visa as soon as I graduated from my undergrad. So I feel like even looking at your journey in New York, having that extra year under your belt and a master's of all things, I think has really stood to you, and we'll get to that part of the journey. But what was like life like for you? What were you like kind of growing up in Ireland? What kind of things were you into?
So I think my parents, there's 4 of us, and my parents had us in every activity under the sun, from Gaelic, Mogi, Cultus, really anything. But I kept with the 2 that I really stuck with were Irish dancing, and I did Billy Barry's. So from the age of 4, I was in Billy Barry's and absolutely loved that. Kept it going till I was 16, but then when I was in boarding school, it just became too much. I was only home 2 days a week, and one day was stuck with Billy Barry, not stuck with, but like in Billy Barry's, and it was just a long day. So at 16, I decided to stop when I broke my foot. But Irish dancing, I kept up until I was about 20 competitively, but still did shows and gigs until I came to New York.
Amazing. And I feel like your Irish dancing career is something that you kind of like never really highlight. It took me a while when getting to know you to know that you did such high level Irish dancing. Like, what were some of the kind of big high achieving moments in your Irish dance career?
I danced from when I was 4 till 20, so it was quite a while. I also had so many injuries throughout it. I loved it so much. My parents used to offer to pay me to quit, but I wouldn't quit because it's just crazy expensive, and I also really just didn't like practicing when I was younger. But I loved being part of it. I'd say my first world championships were actually here in the US. They were in Philadelphia, so that was probably the biggest first moment I had, because I realised, oh my God, why are there so many people watching us on the stage? It was quite scary, and I'd actually never felt like that before or again after that, but I still remember how nervous I was. And then my last competition was 2017. I got second in the Leinster. So that was a good way to round it out. But yeah, I had so many amazing experiences with Irish dancing.
And it seems like Irish dancing has such a big community around the world. Like the amount of people that you and I have met in New York, and you know them through like an Irish dancing competition somewhere in the US, or I didn't realize just how big it was in terms of like community and friendships.
Huge. Like when I arrived here, like someone messaged me on Instagram. She was actually from New York originally, and I competed against her, and we've met up so many times since. My friend Luke from Australia, who I think you've been in contact with before as well. Like I used to go visit them in Australia because we all became friends through dancing. So yeah, there's a huge community, and like New York hosts some of the best dancers in the world. So
wow,
it's no surprise that there's so many here in the city.
Wow, and you definitely haven't had time to do Irish dancing since you got to New York.
I actually couldn't. My hips would give out.
Your poor hips.
They're just not ready for it again.
So good to hear, Rhiannon, all like that part of your journey. And I mean, there's so much I could say about, you know, how I can tell personally, like I think that the confidence that you built through Irish dance and that ability to perform and to meet new people has really stood to you. And I always feel like we're peers in terms of like being like, I feel like you're my age, but you're 25. Like, so it's amazing to see your journey and hear your journey. And I think it's really important for listeners to kind of get a sense of what it takes to kind of really embrace your graduate visa year. And I think you're such a shining example of that. It hasn't been easy, and you've made it look easy. But I think we'll go back to your decision first off to do the grad visa and why New York.
Yeah, so actually my brother, who wouldn't have been like as outgoing probably when we were younger, did the grad visa first before me because he graduated the same year as me because he didn't do his internship year. So we both graduated, and he went off to Chicago for the year, and I visited him twice, once for like in February time and then the other for the whole summer. So I was just there and like, why am I not doing this? And also, why did I not know about this really properly before? I actually never even heard about it in school, in college, nothing. I'd never come across it. He had come across it. And yeah, I was just like, oh, I need to do this. And also the fact there's only one time you can really do it. I know loads of people say like once in a life opportunity to like a million things, but this actually is a once in a life thing because you can only go within this really small particular time frame.
That's so important to hear that. Like, first off, a number of people don't know that the graduate visa is a thing. And like, that's what I came over here on 10 years ago. And there are agencies like UCD and Rhiannon and all of these. There's only a small number of them, actually, like 3 or 4 maybe, I think, that facilitate the grad visa. But basically, for listeners, it is the 12 months after you graduate. So your date of graduation, you have 12 months to do the graduate visa. But if, say, you only do it 6 months into your year after graduating, you still have another 12 months, but you just have to have the application and everything set up, right? In that first
you just have to have left the country over like a year before your graduation date, a year after your graduation date. Yeah, so like I graduated on the 9th of December, so I actually finished my master's in I think August 5th. I didn't graduate till the 9th of December, so I only came out a week before. I came like the first week of December then, 2023.
Okay.
Even though I graduated like
almost
like,
a year
not
before.
Not graduated, but like finished a year and a half almost before. Wow. Or a year and like 4 months, which is like a really big amount of time. So it also helped when I came here, like I was like that much older, even though it's only a year and a bit, but it does feel like that's a big time frame at this age, I feel.
It is. And I think that's the thing. It's not, so even if you're listening now and you graduated, you know, at the start of the summer, you still have like until that date of next year to kind of figure out if you're going to do the grad visa. But I'll leave under this episode some links and stuff for people to get the proper information. But really, after that 12 months after you've graduated, you don't like, it's so hard to find a visa to come to the US. So it is why I always really push it, and I'm doing a collaboration at the minute with UCD about that, because if I didn't come on that grad visa, I wouldn't be here today 10 years later. And although it is not a guarantee that you'll, like, it is only a 12-month visa, you make connections, you know, opportunities arise, you'll go home, but you might have made like an impression in a company, they might be able to hire you. You might be able to look into another visa option. So we are totally big fans of the grad visa. But Rhiannon, so New York as opposed to Chicago, why New York?
So as much as I love Chicago, I just knew that New York was more for me. It's much bigger, more exciting. Like Chicago's great, but I was there in February time and it was freezing and there was not as much to do as there would be in New York. Like I don't want to dish Chicago at all because I do love it there, but it just wasn't the place for me to be longer term. And the summer is there is amazing. So if you are doing a J1 like summer visa, I would definitely say go there and not New York. But for the grad visa, I would say New York is just like nothing compares to it.
I love what you said there about the 3-month summer visa, because New York, and I had Niall Boyle, his episode was out a couple of weeks ago. He made a really good point that like New York City in the summer is so much quieter than other cities in the US because a lot of people leave and go to their houses in the Hamptons or they travel. So finding a job is far harder. And I'm not sure about like the likes of Boston and places like that, but I know like San Diego, San Fran, Chicago are still like, you know, busy and you might have a better shot. And New York is so much more expensive than those cities are still expensive, but New York City is just ridiculous. So if you're only coming for 3 months, you have to spend a lot of money to make it work here. So love that. And I know you love Chicago because you always tell me how amazing your time was there. And I think that really helped you, I guess, you know, prepare for your grad visa.
Oh,
'Cause you had that
100%. Yeah. And even meeting people like older Irish people who'd been there for like 20, 30 years in Chicago, they actually really helped me when I was coming here because the way they would speak to you was very different. Like I feel like in Ireland, we're very like, oh yeah, I guess I did that. Like, thanks. Like we kind of speak a little down on it. And like, it's just our nature, I guess. But the way they like explained, oh no, you have to hype yourself up. Do you not think like your American like peer is going to be speaking so highly of themselves, have done every single degree course, like they've done it all, like every extracurricular. So you really have to like big yourself up. And it like really made a difference to my coming here because I just kind of learned, oh, I can't like whisper and thank and be really like down on the things that you've achieved, because to an American employer or even just people you're meeting, like that's a big deal to them and they want to hear about it. And if you don't tell them, they don't know. And then your opportunity's kind of gone.
That's amazing advice, Rhiannon. You just like encapsulated it so well. Like the difference, the thing that you need to kind of like get over if you want to have a shot at making it in New York or in America is Irish people, we have to kind of get out of our own way and get out of our own heads and be confident and believe in our abilities and our achievements.
And like you can be confident without being cocky. Like that's definitely not the route to go either. Like you don't have to like talk yourself up and big yourself up and be really big-headed. I don't think it's about that at all. I just think like if you've done something, give it the like...
Yeah, give it the gravitas that it deserves. Yeah.
Everybody else here is, and if you don't, you're actually just doing yourself such a disservice. And everyone who's Irish here is also doing the same thing. Like everyone's learned how to do it. No one's like talking about you behind your, like I feel like that's how we would perceive it at home. Maybe that it's like a little bit like, oh wow, she's so cocky. But you do have to be a little bit more like confident in what you're saying to people here.
Brilliant. And I feel like that I got that sense from you the minute we met. So just to give a little bit of background, Rhiannon had reached out to me on LinkedIn. It was at a time, it was like early January or February, and I was getting tons of messages from grads and I always tried my best to like reply or try to set up a meeting or whatever. And it was funny because we had tried to meet and something happened. I think I couldn't do it. And then you messaged me again and it was like on a Friday evening and I was trying to get out of the city and I was like, oh, I hadn't even like looked at your profile. I had quickly looked at your resume and I was like, oh, she's like got loads of stuff going on for her. Like she's a really strong grad and almost to the point where I was like, she probably doesn't even need to meet me, but like I'll meet her. And I was like thinking like, oh, maybe if I meet her for a quick coffee, I'll get home at this time. And at the moment I met you, I was just like, wow. I was like, firstly, I want to be friends with you and I want to learn from you because like within 5 minutes you had like given me your elevator pitch, but not in a way that was like, give me a job, help me. You were just like, so I'm here, this is what I do. I really want to get involved in like the Irish community and support and, you know, meet as many people as possible. And you just had this energy that I was like, wow, like you knew what you wanted to get out of the year. You're also, super supportive for me. I had a couple of ideas about the podcast by doing a video series, and you were like, yep, we can do that. And like 2 days later, we were doing it. And I was just like, this girl has no, like, there's just, the opportunities are endless. And I think, people who are maybe considering coming on the grad visa, or even graduates who are listening now, could really learn a thing or two. And I know, you're very much like figuring it out as you go. It's not like you've done I'm not saying that you've got it all, like you've worked super hard, but I think, your approach, what did you do kind of to prepare yourself for the grad visa?
I think it really helped being like that a little bit older because, excuse me, sorry. Because when I was in my undergrad, like you would not recognize the way I am
Really?
Today. Absolutely not. I think I was voted most likely to drop out of my course.
What?
And my course had like over 250 people. So I was much more interested in the social aspect and like going out, and like I wouldn't miss a party or a night out, or like I just loved college, but not necessarily studying. But yeah, so I think the maturity side of it, like I wouldn't have had at all. So I have such a huge respect for people who are coming over as straight out of their undergrad, because I don't think I would have been as like ready to do that. That extra year definitely helped. So with that, I was like, okay, if I've done this and I'm doing a year and I'm committing a year to going to New York, I just need to like make it work. Because I had that experience in Chicago, I just was really like ambitious about what my goals were. I also spoke to people who had been on grad visas, heard firstly the money they were making, and heard the experiences they were getting, like what they got, events they got to do. And I was like, well, if they're doing that, why could I not do that? And like, just make it work for it. Like, I feel like you can just like make your way into anything here, because there's so much opportunity. So I was like, right, I'm just going to make a list. So I got on LinkedIn. I made a list of everyone in the Irish network, the Digital Irish, like our IBO. I went to my alumni, took all the New York names, contacted my alumni relations director, Gillian from UCD, who is also very, very helpful. Yeah, I connected with everyone on LinkedIn, made like a spreadsheet of their name, where they went to college, like everything about them, where they worked, who their mutual possibly could be. And I just like pages of that, really, because you have so little time when you get here, and you've 90 days to get a job, and I wasn't coming over with a job. So I was like, okay, this needs to be like done before I get here. And I was doing nothing at home. It's like October, November time, it's raining. There wasn't much to do. So I just like went through that whole list, and I didn't actually reach out to anyone until I got here. I just knew everything about everyone before I got here. So whenever I was going, I think I landed and there was an Emerald Isle event on the first night, and I knew who most people in the room were just from LinkedIn, which sounds like a stalker. But I feel like that is something that you actually do need to do, because you don't have time when you're here. Like, you also don't want to. Like, you want to spend those hours like making friends, meeting people, going to different events. Like, you still want a social life when you're here. But for those few weeks when you're at home, that's the one thing I'd recommend. It really, really helped me. So when people were speaking to me, I already knew who they were. And like, if I could help them, or if they could help me, or just like it's a conversation starter.
Wow, Rhiannon, you could work for like the government.
They would never have
that level of research. I'm so impressed. It's slightly creepy, but I'm so impressed.
Exactly. It's like stalker vibes.
But it's interesting to hear, like, it's inspiring to hear how much work you put into that, and that really has paid off for you, because... But
Rhiannon do actually like give you that advice as well. Yeah. So like they just tell you what to do. You actually, that's one thing I will say, the sponsor company I went with was Rhiannon, and they I'm not sure about the other companies. I think they're all very similar, but they give you tasks every week that you had to have done. I just kind of went overboard on the tasks. But they do make you, you have to provide that to them and show them that you're actually researching and doing stuff before you get here in order to actually get approved for your visa on their behalf for them to sponsor you. So they actually are giving you the tools and the steps to do it. You just have to do it.
That's great. And I suppose you've been involved in a number of the Graduate Gateway events that's a group that a network, I guess, that's kind of come about in the last year. And it's like a collaboration between a number of different groups. You can find the Graduate Gateway on LinkedIn and on Instagram. And basically it's a mix of people who've been around for a while, and we're trying to help grads kind of figure out New York, figure out the job search, connect employers with grads. And it's been going on traditionally for years, but now we're just kind of formalizing it. And we've had discussions around like some of the faux pas for grads. And it's not for like lack of trying, and it's not like intentional, but some of the things I think that would be useful actually to hear from you, Rhiannon, you know, because a few things that like jump out for me is when a graduate will like LinkedIn message me, and the message will be quite like, what's the word I'm looking for? Just, it's like a copied and pasted message. Like, hi, I'm coming to New York, or I'm in New York, I'm looking for a job. Can you help me? And it's really, really frustrating whenever I get something. And I know a number of the other sort of mentors in that group would agree that you want to be able to like feel like that you're being respected and that your time is being respected. So that's one thing. Another thing, I guess, is kind of, if you're connecting, so say you were looking for a job and I was like, oh, I know someone, I'm going to connect you by email and you can meet for a coffee, and then you don't do any research on the person. So it feels like you were really like prepared when you met people. Is there any other sort of tips or any things like that you could speak to that are important for grads to kind of be aware of?
Yeah, I definitely say the LinkedIn messages, they're very generic. Because I now started to get some since I got involved, because I'm on the board of the Irish network here. So I'd have people reaching out through that, and also through the Graduate Gateway event. So some were very generic, and like in certain instances, like I always made sure I would know, like if I messaged someone, I'd know who they are if they walked up to me. But like I approached 2 people who had messaged me previously and was like, hey, like you reached out to me on LinkedIn, like I can answer your questions next. I met them at the Irish consulate. Like, sorry, who are you?
Oh no.
And I was like, you messaged me 3 times. Yeah. And like, it's fine. It's not like I'm full of my own importance, but I just think it's just, now it makes it a little bit like I don't really want to help as much. If you'd like taken the time to have a couple of questions, like I definitely would have been able to help because of the connections that I made here, or like even just any advice. But don't go up and just don't act. I think it's like kind of like too cool to know the people are. No, like you have to like I would go up to people and be like, hi, my name's Rhiannon. This, like, just like Fergal, for example. I'd be like, oh, I know, like, you do Digital Irish. I love that work. Can I have a look at the directory? Can I help on anything? Is there anything I could do? And, like, I just think that made that helped me a lot, because I realised if I hadn't prepared that way, I mightn't have gotten the same, like, responses. And also I realised, like, I had, like, 6 and 7 and 8 people. If I really wanted to contact someone and, like, I thought they could, like, help me get a job, I'd meet anyone who was even connected to them and be like, hi, I would really love an introduction. This is what I'm about. This is what I want. And I do remember meeting one person and I didn't have my my one-liner ready, and I got like grilled for it. And it was like, you're not prepared, like you didn't know this. That was also, I don't think it was like anything wrong that I said, but also some people just don't have the time, and you have to really respect that. Like, she wanted a 1 minute, this is who I am, this is what I'm about, and this is what I want, rather than I just want to work in digital marketing. No, like, what role do you want? What companies do you want? What's your sector? Like, be really, really, really specific. Otherwise, and like, it gave me a really big reality check at the time, because at the start I was like, oh, wow, that was rude. But it actually wasn't rude. It was like very valuable for me, because I never did that again. I never went like and spoke to someone with like 10 sentences when it could be one. So I think that's really important when you're speaking to someone who doesn't have a lot of time. Like time is money to them. It's valuable, and they have like a lot going on. And meeting them for a coffee, like they might have days that are going from like 7 till like 8 p.m. and meeting you for a coffee is like an inconvenience, but they want to help and they want to give back. Just give them a reason to want to give back.
Brilliant advice. Brilliant. And I think that advice can apply to people at different stages, like in their career, if they're looking for a change or, you know, trying to expand their network, because I think it requires a level of self-awareness that when you're kind of comfortable in what you're doing, or you're kind of in a safe place with your job or your degree, you don't really have to reflect on, sometimes you don't have to reflect on where you are or where you want to go if you're quite content. So I think coming to New York, no matter what stage you are at, or if you're in New York or in a city like in the US and you have ambition, it is so important. It took me a while to get that and not be offended when people kind of were like, what's your deal? And I'd be like, relax, get to know me. So it's that, essentially that elevator pitch.
Yeah. And like, I also was told before, and like also the most valuable advice that initially I was so offended by, but talk less, listen more. And I was like, but it was coming from a really good place. Like, you will learn so much more, and you will actually get so much more from listening to what people are saying, rather than thinking that you can help, like, or like, you don't need to talk all the time. Not that you're obviously talking all the time, not you, sorry, like me, but just like listen a lot more to people, and you'll find that you learn a lot more. It will help you a lot more, and you are not just thinking of what you think they want to hear. You're letting them like go. And it took me a while then to like, I remember I would like listen so much that I wouldn't really have responses at the start, but it was harsh reality, but like I needed it, and it really stood to me. So I think like when you will get like a lot of like brash, like honest feedback in America, and it's not always a negative to get that, and like going on the defensive won't help. Like it really, really stood to me, because I feel like that was like a really big like changing point for me.
That's such good advice. That like truly, I'm like, I needed to hear that, because I think it is really important to, especially in those formative years in New York, to detach yourself from your not your emotions. Obviously it's important to not and never detach yourself from your emotions, but like how you feel judged. Yeah. Because I think that is particular to New York and New Yorkers, is that they're going to say things how they are. And as you say, time is so valuable, whether it's a job interview or whether you're meeting someone, you know, a peer or somebody who might potentially be able to connect you with someone else. That's another thing I always like remind people, is that graduates especially, is like, treat every sort of person in the Irish network or in the network where you want to work like you would the CEO of that company. Because over the years, like it's been the kind of connections at like grassroots level, I'll say, that have helped me in so many different ways. And that's like, you can never overlook the person that's in the same position as you, even another graduate, for instance. Like, you just never know. And I think it's having that kind of openness and willingness, and the listening thing is a really good piece of advice.
Yeah, definitely was not that fun to hear the first time. Then I reflected and I was like, oh wait, that's so right.
But it's our reaction. If somebody kind of challenges you or like not like criticizes you, it's your reaction to kind of defend yourself. So I suppose taking on that kind of, you know, constructive criticism is something, yeah, that we all consistently have to work on.
Yeah, and I'm not saying you to listen to everyone, but like when someone's coming from a really good place and they actually are looking to help you out, you will recognize that. So yeah, I definitely would say you will learn a lot, and you can get some harsh realities in New York, but it's all like positive in the end.
Yeah, take it with a pinch of salt.
Yeah, absolutely. But do listen sometimes.
Do listen sometimes. I love that. So advice on the job search.
So for the job search, you
had your LinkedIn spreadsheet.
Yes, I had my LinkedIn spreadsheet again, and I went through it all and like what industries people worked in, who was connected to who. I went to like every networking event that was on. Well, I firstly came in December. I would say be strategic firstly about when you come for the job search. I wouldn't be coming like in the summertime for a grad visa, because the job scene is like empty. Like, you're coming in like late August, early September, where people are hiring, coming in December, like late December or December into January when people are hiring, February people are hiring, coming into summer people aren't hiring as much. It's just like, look at the trends of when people are hiring more, which is really important, because I knew a lot of people who were really struggling because they'd come over just maybe at not the most optimal time, and they may have just been as qualified for jobs. Like, a lot of my friends were like overqualified for roles, but because there was not as many jobs on the scene at that time, that was like a real hindrance to their experience. They were quite stressed. So to avoid that, if you can, pick your time strategically. And then in terms of job search, I actually found my job through LinkedIn Easy Apply, which a lot of people are very surprised by, but also so did my housemate. Don't rely solely on the Irish connections, the Irish network. People can't move mountains. If they're not in a position to hire, they're not in a position to hire. The roles are very specific when you're on a grad visa. You really need something that's within your degree. So that's also a limiting factor. Also, it's just not that easy to find a job. Like, really not that easy to find a job. I was doing like 70, 80, 90 easy applies a day in January time, early January. December, I just kind of spent more networking. I wasn't even applying for roles because, again, there wasn't many up there on LinkedIn in December. I had connected with lots of people and there were roles that people had available, but it mightn't have been exactly what I wanted. So I just wanted to hold out until I was giving myself until the end of January to like have a role secured. I definitely think do not neglect LinkedIn. Don't neglect LinkedIn Easy Applies. Reach out to the hiring managers and make your CV way better than you think it should be. Because I looked at CVs and my own CV, like if I look at it from my first draft of my CV or resume as they call it here to my last, it's totally different.
Really? What's different?
I know stats. They want numbers in America. So like I actually had met with Aidan, who's with Enterprise Ireland, and he just looked at it and he was like, but what you're telling me in person is way better than what's on this resume. Like, where is that there? This is pointless. That's like, just like different pointers that you may think are important may not be as important. And like your part-time job when you were like 16 is not as important maybe as like an extracurricular achievement that you might have neglected on your resume because you didn't realize the importance of that in America. It's just getting other people to look at it, fine-tuning it like 5, 6, 7 times. And yeah, I just think it really was helpful. I don't remember what like draft of resume actually got me my role in the end, but I know there was a lot of them.
A lot of them and a lot of work put into them. And there's actually a really handy resume builder on the Digital Irish website and the Graduate Gateway website for anyone who kind of wants, like, has no idea where to start. But basically the difference is a resume is a 1-pager and the structure is slightly different. And they really do kind of rely on the resume whenever you've applied for a job. It needs to be really like accurate and very much sell you as a person and your strengths. And tell me as well, with the LinkedIn Easy Apply, did you have to do cover letters as well? No, just your resume.
It's really quick. It's like resume. That's why you have to try for the LinkedIn Easy Apply. I wouldn't have tailored it. But I tailored it for like every role I particularly really wanted. Like I remember at the time I was like, hi, can you do an interview tomorrow? I was like, I wonder what company this is. End up being great, but yeah, I didn't have a clue because I'd applied to that many. And the one thing I'd also say is remember to say you're fully authorized to work in the US and do not require sponsorship in the first like elevator pitch at the very top. You definitely need to include that. That's like because I know a lot of them say like if you ever require a sponsorship, you're not eligible for this role. Just keep applying. Apply to everything because that's not always the case. My company weren't wanting anyone who required sponsorship past a year, but that didn't stop them from hiring. So it's just something they have to like cut down the number of resumes they're receiving, but just keep pushing out your resume as much as possible.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I think whenever I came on the grad visa, I actually wasn't really clear on what the grad visa was. I thought this was just a specific Irish visa, but J visas, the grad visa is a J visa, apply to countries all over the world. So plenty of these kind of bigger companies are aware of what a J visa is. And I think what you're saying there, which I really appreciate and agree with, is be selective about, maybe your goal is to stay in the States and to live here for 5 years, 10 years. But the truth, I guess, is with the grad visa, it's 12 months. So you will have to leave after that 12 months. Is that to say, that you're going to ask the company before you leave, will you hire me again? Can we look into it? Like that can all be figured out and you'll make other connections. If that role is only going to be 12 months, like it's still going to be you here for 12 months. So I think it's super important what you've said, like don't cut yourself off by saying, yes, I do require further sponsorship. No, you're here and authorized to work here for 12 months.
Yeah, you don't need to specify things they don't ask you.
I love that answer. So, and then in terms of the job interview process, I know you got snapped up very quickly. But what did you find different about the interview process here? Or I feel like you've already sort of like selling yourself is a big part of it, right?
Yeah, I actually didn't find the interview process different. I found the reception a bit different. Okay. Like you really just had to sell yourself. They weren't like they didn't ask questions. You had to talk the whole time. And they'd only interject if they needed specific like questions, but Whereas at home, I would find it's more like you're guided through the interview. Definitely you're not guided. Well, in my experience, sorry. You're not. Wasn't guided through the interview. I just kind of had to keep going and hope that I was like hitting the things that they wanted to be. Yeah. But like just look at the role description. It's the same process. I just think be a lot more confident in your answers than you may have felt you needed to be before. But other than that, it's not much different.
I so agree with what you're saying there as well, because I find that sort of performance is a big part of what I do now as a charity auctioneer. So when I have a strategy call, which is basically an interview from the organization if they're going to hire you to go on stage for them, and they just sort of like, there could be 10 people on a call and they're like, so nice to meet you, tell us about yourself. And I literally just have to click at my fingers and just sell myself. And the first time I was just like, I was waiting for them to ask me questions, and then I was like, oh, there's no questions coming, I just have to go. Like, and you really have to like engage with people on the call, and as you say, hit those points. So like just relook at whatever it is, what their goals are, what they hope for the role, or what, you know, and then just try to intertwine that into your sort of presentation, if you will.
Yeah, and do play on the fact that you're Irish. Yeah. Like, I know we don't think it's like anything like huge, but to them it is. And that charm and stuff that comes with being Irish. But also we're very lucky in comparison to a lot of people in America. Like, we come from like a really high educated background that we're not in debt for from undergrad. We have a lot more options than they do here. So we're entering in a really privileged position, and the people who have come before us, like in the last 20, 30, however many years, have really made a really, really strong reputation for the Irish people, which I found really helpful. So not only just do the same for the next, but use that. Like, there's a lot of really high up Irish people in New York City, and everyone in New York City has like made such a great reputation as hardworking, have a lot of initiative. So play on those things, because you don't realize how much more equipped you are for a role until you're actually in there. And yeah, you feel very valued as an Irish person in the office, I feel.
Totally agree. And you caught on to that very early, which is amazing. So Rhiannon, now I'd love to talk a little bit about some of the things I'm asked regularly, and I'm sure you are too, but about cost and accommodation. I think what I'm usually asked most about is where to look for accommodation to stay for a year, or like even for a few months.
So Facebook groups is number one for sure. WhatsApp groups are also huge. Once you have like completed your application process, like your sponsor company automatically put you into WhatsApp groups of people who are already there, people who are incoming. So there's every single day there's subletting for this amount of months, looking for a new roommate to sign on to this. So you're huge Irish options, but also like don't neglect, there's a lot of, I'm not sure for like what on Facebook, but I know like I'm in like a lot of like females 25 to 30, females between 22 and 27 looking for accommodation in Brooklyn, and like it's all vetted, and then you can like meet them and stuff. Like Let's Make Our Lives Easier is the number one Facebook group for everything, especially accommodation. So if you're ever looking, that's my number one suggestion. I actually found someone I knew like just maybe 2 months before I got here had posted on that group saying, oh, like, she actually hadn't posted at all. Someone else had posted, and I saw she commented under it maybe a month beforehand. And I was like, hi, are you potentially like looking for someone to take over your room? And so I got really lucky that way, and it went really well. But like a lot of people, you fall in with the right people. Also, the other thing is if you're looking for a house, which I didn't have to do, and I think that is a lot more stressful when you're looking for a house with other people. Guarantors is a big thing. It has to be a US guarantor if they even accept a guarantor. And then the other thing is a bond. Is that the
credit
right
score?
Yeah, that as well. But you can like pay for a guarantor essentially.
Oh yes, yeah, I've heard about this. Yeah,
it's really, really expensive.
Yeah, so actually looking for individual rooms is easier. Yeah,
for sure. I wouldn't even like. I personally wouldn't be looking to get a house because it's a lot more stressful and financially a huge difference. But obviously, Everyone has different what they like needs and what they want. So there is a lot of options. There's a lot of resources out there. You just have to look.
I love that. I think that's actually really important. Instead of, say, you're coming over as a group of 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever. Yeah, like it's okay to split up because and it will make it easier, because if you're just slotting into a room and you're not having to like sign a lease and deal with all of the additions that come with that. So, and then in terms of areas, where have you found most popular for grads?
Well, I'm in Bushwick, and so is pretty much everyone I know. It seems like everyone seems to be going to Bushwick now. Yeah. And I've never even heard of it before. So that's in Brooklyn. There's a huge young Irish crowd there. Also, Williamsburg is lovely. I would recommend Williamsburg if you could.
If you can afford Williamsburg.
Yeah, I'd say it's also very expensive, so only if you get really lucky. Astoria as well, which I actually haven't been out to yet. But Astoria is the other one. Not too many in the city. The city's really expensive. Also, it's pros and cons of living in the city and living in Brooklyn. There's like, it's 2 different types of living situations, but neither, I wouldn't say like either outweigh the other. The cost is the main differentiator. Yeah,
and it's I mean, if you're living in Brooklyn or Queens, you're really close to the city. Like, that's one thing. It's like the subway is so quick and handy. There's also like a lot of people move up to Woodlawn, and there's a Metro North and the subway from there. It's a little bit further than like Astoria or Bushwick, but I think affordability has to come into it, and it's nice to be around other Irish people for sure. I think especially where you live, because like you're going to be in Manhattan most days anyway.
Exactly, especially if you're working in Manhattan. Most people end up working in Manhattan, and like me and my friends all live within like 15-20 minute walking distance of each other, like in a circle in Bushwick, and we're all in different houses. So it's really nice to have people who are nearby, even just go for walks in the evening or just to do stuff like locally rather than always being in the city as well. And it's not far away at all.
So in terms of cost, were you surprised? Had you prepared? Had you saved money? And what's your advice around that?
I'd saved nothing.
Same as that.
But I definitely do not recommend doing that. Yeah. It's really, really, really expensive. Especially different times of the year are more expensive than others. Christmas time, extortion. Like summertime, you just can't say no to anything because it's summer and you feel like you have to go to everything. But like all times of the year in New York are busy. I'd say the quietest, easiest times to not need money is probably January, February. But like in general, like food is expensive and like the quality just isn't the same. And if you want quality that's even similar to home, like I don't really know how you could afford it. As a graduate in New York, like even just transport every day, like it's $3 every time you go on the subway, which obviously don't get Ubers. Subways are way better, way faster and way cheaper. But like it all adds up. Comparison to home, your rent is I find the rent is pretty similar to Dublin at this stage for the same proximity to where you'd be living. So especially comparable to when your wages are much higher here. So like before you're working, it's really expensive. When you're working, I don't find it to be too expensive. I think it's very comparable to home once you have your job, but I would come over with a bunch of savings. For that initial rent fee, you have to pay your deposit up front as well for your room if you're renting. You also have to pay for like the guarantor or like the bond, whichever it is. Like there's just a lot of upfront expenses when you arrive. And if you don't have a job, you're not on that same like cost of living.
That's great advice, absolutely. And I think when you're at home and even if you're not living at home, we're so like familiar with the price and cost of things, and like I think without even intentionally thinking about it, we don't overspend during the week especially. But I think New York in my first few months as well, and even now still today, like I'll go and buy like 2 coffees during the day and I'm like, what am I doing? Like this is so extortionate. So I think coming over with a little bit of like money sense, like giving yourself a budget each week, especially before you have a job, and then doing what you need to do to make money when you can. You know, there's so many grads I know that do babysitting and any other kind of work they can do while they're searching for that dream job, because you do not want to find yourself under pressure. Because I think when you're under pressure financially, it doesn't matter what stage you're at in life, and you're in a city like New York, it's so crippling because everything costs and you can't live a life that's like happy without, you know, a certain amount of money. You can't be content.
Oh, for sure. And also you're in New York for 1 year, so you do not want to miss out on doing anything. So you're putting yourself under huge financial pressure as it is, because you're like, well, I can't miss going to this place. I can't miss going to this viewpoint. I can't miss going to this place for food or drinks or whatever it is, because like you don't want to miss out on things, and I don't think you should miss out on those things either. So save before you get here if possible. Just for the initial, like it is fine once you're working and you've a steady income coming in, and the cost of living comparative to depending on what you're on, but like you should be on a wage that makes it not too stretched to be able to do what you want to do in New York, as long as you're not like crazy lavish.
You can't live like
beyond your means.
Beyond the means, which is what I constantly do,
oh,
even 10 years
same.
later. So Rhiannon, tell us work culture, and you can be honest and as possible. American work culture versus Irish work culture in terms of like office culture, corporate culture. You've worked in and like done extra, you know, sort of curriculars with all different networks and stuff. And I think you've got such a vast experience now of different like types of companies and businesses and networks. What do you think is different for grads coming, like they should sort of be aware of in terms of that work culture and work ethic?
Yeah, so I feel that here, well, I also don't know if a lot of it stems from the fact that I graduated during COVID. So my perception of work is that you should be able to work remote as much as you need to. I know under the grad visa you're meant to be like a minimum amount of days in the office, but I found that to be a challenge, like the lack of, like the rigidity of like being in the office all the time, because it is a commute every day and stuff like that. But then
so like long days.
Extremely long days, and people do not take their lunch. I was the only person in my office to take a lunch, and just because I knew, I was like, well, I like worked it out my hour, like on an hour. I was like, wait, I'm in here for 9 hours a day and I'm getting paid for 8, therefore 1 hour is mine. And I worked like so close to Central Park, so I used to go off to Central Park for an hour every single day, eat my lunch. But it was like they kept just being like, wow, you're so Gen Z, like I can't believe you're doing that.
You're having
and
lunch.
I was like, no, I'm just not ordering like lunch to my desk and eating it on my desk every, like I found that quite difficult, but I just stuck to it because I knew that if I didn't like start that way, I'd get sucked into, oh, it's too late, they might think I'm being lazy, and there's all these different things. And then I also find the difference is I feel like this is just my experience, talking a lot more than working, and meetings a lot more than physically getting the work done was what I experienced. And I found that quite difficult being in an office setting all the time, because I thought like there's ways to be more efficient, but that's also may not just be the difference between home and here. It may just be because I graduated during COVID. So there wasn't that, like the efficiency levels were higher, but like just the work culture here is just very different. They work way longer hours. They expect a lot more for a lot, but you are rewarded, like financially compensated for that. However, like the boundaries, the way they will be at home just aren't there. And I found that to be a bit challenging. Yeah. And like office politics and stuff, but like that could be at home too. It's just like different cultural ways of like working. Oh, the way we always heard about America being, it didn't change when I was here.
Well, it's so good to talk about it, because I think as you've said there, you're right. It's not just like Irish versus American. It's also different sizes of companies and corporate structures, startups versus kind of these big sort of financial firms. I'm sure people who get an internship there, it's a lot different as well. It depends what kind of role you're doing. But I think the general kind of, it's really good. I think I wish I sort of knew this before I moved to New York, was that, you know, you are expected to not really leave your desk in the traditional sort of sense of that corporate structure. It's until you have developed or like spent a number of like years working for a company will you maybe get to have that bit more flexibility. Obviously there's more modern structures and more modern companies now and startups that are way more flexible, but I think like generally it is important to know that, you know, they have a level of expectation from you, especially if you're like new and you're a graduate. And it actually, I find that, you know, it worked in my favor in my first year at least to do a wee bit extra where I could like stay on for half an hour one day, and if I didn't like need to leave, because then you kind of, people aren't like kind of looking over at you, but then as even the months add up, you can start to kind of, you know, be a bit more vocal with like what it is you need. Would you agree with that?
I kind of didn't use that approach.
Okay.
I just kind of set my boundaries straight away.
That's good.
And
yeah, I wish I did that. I learned so much from you, Rhiannon.
No, it's just because I know my limits in what I would be able to take, and I didn't want to set up, I found the workload not to be too much or anything like that. It's not the actual workload. It's just the physically being there for such long hours without a lot of diversity in what you're doing, and every day it's the same. And just being in New York and knowing that Central Park's on your doorstep, I found that to be the challenge. And maybe that's just a me thing. I think it is a lot of just to do with me. But
no, I don't.
The holidays though as well.
I know. So
it's
the 10
days holiday. And sorry, 6 months in, you don't have holidays because you have to accrue your holidays, which I didn't realise. And I was here booking holidays off and doing this, and I'd reached my 10 days by, I'm going to say, May. And I was like, wait, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, that's it now.
Yeah.
And I just found that really challenging as someone who loves to travel.
Oh, it's not enough.
No, it's absolutely not. But then there's just a lot of different rules that we're not used to at home, and sick days are not the same. You're challenged on them and stuff like that. It's just a different work culture. And it's not to say that it's wrong, even though it wouldn't be my preference of working. It's just very different to what I thought.
Well, I guess it's changing. I think since COVID, it's changed a lot in New York. And although there's still plenty of sort of structures that still operate that way, I think it's much more flexible. So hopefully for grads listening, you will find a role in a company that isn't too extreme. And if you have the opportunity to kind of, if you have a couple of offers, or, you can negotiate some of these things in the interview process if they're going to give you an offer, it's really good to know that.
Yeah, for sure. And look them up on Glassdoor.
Yeah.
And check the company culture, because that's something that I definitely would recommend doing. I actually didn't think of it initially when I was going through the process, but in hindsight, I wish I had. Not that the company I was with was bad or anything like that. I just wish I had done it just for
your own kind of prep.
For future experiences, something I would do. I definitely think company culture does vary from company to company. It depends if you're in a founder-led company, depends if you're in a startup, depends if you're in a massive corporate. So look into what suits you as well, because you'll be much happier there. So if you do have the option, do look into the different work cultures that exist.
Absolutely. And another thing that reminded me of is, I remember at home, even in my gap year between, I took a year for work experience, and I worked in a sponsorship department of a big bank, and they would be if I worked extra, they'd be that's your time in lieu, take that another time. And I'd be this is amazing. If I worked in an event, they'd be you get those 2 hours or 3 hours next week or whatever. And I was that's so nice and fair. And then it would actually it would incentivize you to work even when they didn't need you, because of that. And I think obviously there's more kind of startup led businesses now that sort of structure that are, I think it is sort of more popular than it used to be. But I remember at a particular job I had here in New York, I would work events until 10 or 11 o'clock, literally hosting, cleaning, doing the whole thing. And I would be expected to be in the next morning at 9. I'd be what? I haven't even had time to get home.
That's where you should set your boundaries.
Exactly. Honestly. So it's so important to kind of hear that you should, although at times you might feel kind of beggars can't be choosers when you're on that job hunt. It is, if you have prepared and you do have the opportunity to kind of be a bit selective, it's important to know those things.
Yeah, and I feel if the more value you have, the more value you place into how confident you are in what you can do, you'd surprise yourself. Your boundaries definitely go up a lot more in a good way. And I don't think that you should don't expect them to kneel down and beg for you or anything like that, because that's definitely not the case and will never happen. I do think that do value yourself more. I found that I had to fake value myself at the start, and it really helped, because if you think oh well, if she did it, why can't I do it? Not that someone's not better than you or not worse than you or anything like that. It's just more be fake confident even if you're not, because you definitely, once you're in there, if once you're in there you can do the job. If there's stuff on that process that you don't know, I actually don't really know everything about that, you can learn it. Just go for it.
So you can learn on the go. That's so important. Don't undersell yourself or believe in yourself and your ability to adapt.
Yeah, just because your American counterpart is 100% doing that. So I don't know why you would do yourself a disservice in thinking that you're not. And you're definitely like overqualified for a lot of the roles you're going for as a grad visa, because it is an internship that they want you to go for. Like, you're way overqualified for an internship. So don't knock yourself down before you've even like gone through the process.
Especially coming out of Ireland, as you said already, the highly educated kind of like, we are really, really well prepped coming here, and it's important to not forget that and feel like you're inadequate in any way.
Yeah, for sure.
Rhiannon, we are like at time. I feel like that we talked for 10 minutes and now it's over. I'm very sad about that. Before we go, tell us, do you think after your grad year you will be back in New York City?
I'd love to always stay connected to New York. I'm not sure in what capacity yet. I'm not finished yet by no means. But like, I absolutely love New York. It's so fast paced. If anyone's doing a grad visa, it's the city I would recommend by far. I've not obviously spent as much time in any of the other like major cities, but I visited them all. I do think New York is the most opportunistic place to be. There's so much opportunity everywhere you go. Everyone is so helpful. Everyone's really well connected. The Irish Network, the IBO, Digital Irish, Graduate Gateway, like there's so many people there to help you. I definitely won't like lose the relationships that I've made here, and I'd hope like whatever I end up doing, like I would be able to like still have New York as part of it. So whatever that might be, if it's living here, if it's not, I'm not sure.
Well, watch this space, Rhiannon, because you have you've made an incredible impact in New York City, and you're such a brilliant example of what can be achieved. And I know you're going to be running your own company, creating your own culture one day very soon.
I think I'm just too independent.
No, yes, exactly. That's it. But
like, that's just me.
That's
like
you.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not even a more positive thing than someone who's working in a massive corporate, because that's like such an amazing thing. I just definitely wouldn't. It's just not for me.
It's great that you've been able to identify that through this process, though. That's really,
100%.
really good. Yeah.
Yeah, because like other people, that's so suits them, that security level. I don't thrive in that environment.
Yeah.
And so I just have to do what's better for what I want to do. But you learn so much about yourself being in New York. And I think that even if you're only here for a year, you'll learn a lot more than you could ever learn anywhere else. Specifically being at home. Yeah. Home is always there. Like, you can always go back home. That 1 year opportunity you get to do the grad visa, I would like take it and grasp it with two hands and just go for it.
Amazing. Rhiannon, thank you so much for being a guest.
Thank you so much for having me.